Companies panic, drop DEI over anti-woke activists, lawsuits, and boycotts. Adweek is concerned that it's not just because of social media that brands are dropping DEI. They want you to understand that they're also getting sued. They're getting threatened by attorneys general. And they're worried about more boycotts like the Bud Light boycott with Dylan Mulvaney. Those things are likely true. There's more than one reason why companies are dropping DEI. But without a doubt, what's going on social media every time the next company gets targeted, every time the name comes up, it's got a huge effect on these companies. Media is still pushing propaganda, though, that tries to tell you diversity by itself can get you a more profitable and more productive board of directors. From Fast Company, corporate DEI may be under attack, but S&P 500 companies with diverse boards perform better. So all you need to do is get a couple of people that don't look like you on a board of directors, and that's going to be productive. That's going to make sure that all the decision making is effective. In fact, it'll help you plan the strategy with the chief executive officer of the company. Also from Forbes, diversity by class background can improve team performance. So if you have people that have a different kind of upbringing and you put those people together, all of a sudden, you're going to have a much more productive team performance. And if you don't, you better not question whether or not people are qualified, because Forbes will explain that's all you really need to do. You need to just throw people together, make sure they're from different backgrounds, and then just see what happens. It's going to be great. Also from Forbes, and this is the silliest one yet, with so many CEO exits, it's time to tap a diversity officer to lead. It took me a couple times of reading this headline and then reading some of the article to understand that what they're actually saying in this article is that why have a CEO who's qualified to be chief executive officer when you can get the chief diversity officer and just put them in the position of CEO? That should be great. Why don't they do that? There are quite a few good reasons for why you would not do that. It's the same kind of reason for why you wouldn't say take a school teacher and put them as the pilot of an airplane, because it's a different skill set and you actually do have to learn some things before you can actually do a job. One is a pretend job and one is a real job. From Adweek, the real reasons why so many brands have broken their DEI promises. On June 6, 2024, a 35-year-old Tennessean named Robbie Starbuck got wind of something that ticked him off. The retail chain where Starbuck bought feed for the cattle on his 12-acre ranch had adopted multiple policies and initiatives aimed at fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so Starbuck, a former music video director who'd amassed a considerable social media following as a conservative activist, logged on to Twitter. Quote, "It's time to expose Tractor Supply," Starbuck wrote, citing LGBT events at work and DEI hiring practices among his grievances. "We don't want our hard-earned money spent on these woke priorities," he wrote. He's absolutely right, and they followed his lead. A few weeks later, coincidentally or not, it was no coincidence, Tractor Supply issued a statement announcing that it planned to eliminate DEI roles and retire our current DEI goals. With that notch in his holster, Starbucks set his sights on other companies including Ford, Molson Coors, and Harley-Davidson. These brands joined John Deere, Lowe's, and Target on a roster of major companies that have ended or severely curtailed their DEI policies. And all of those companies refused to discuss their changes with Adweek. Starbucks has been widely credited with scaring corporations about diversity, but it's easy to overlook a larger point. It's taken more than one man and his Twitter postings to get where we are now. A matrix of political, social, and economic factors has been necessary for brands to change their tune on diversity. When major news outlets began reporting on companies walking back their DEI promises earlier this summer, it was easy to assume the about-face had happened overnight. But the corporate retreat actually started at least a year ago, well before commentators like Starbucks and business titans like hedge fund mogul Bill Ackman, who's called DEI policies racist, grabbed headlines. And of course, policies that discriminate based on race, for whatever reason, are racist. On June 29, 2023, the Supreme Court halted 4 decades of precedent when it struck down affirmative action in college admissions. Yet, when affirmative action was first put into place, it was assumed It was not going to be permanent. It was assumed it would be temporary to create a social change. And it did create a social change. So it was time to get rid of affirmative action, and that's what the Supreme Court did. While that decision didn't directly address corporate hiring, it clearly led to what came next. 14 days after the High Court's ruling, the CEOs of 100 of America's leading brands, heavyweights like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and Airbnb, received a letter bearing the signatures of 13 states' attorneys general. Its purpose was to put corporate America on notice about its DEI programs. That is what you do when you're an attorney general. When you see illegal things happening in your state, you write a letter to companies telling them, hey, don't do illegal things anymore, or we might go after you. Quote, treating people differently because of the color of their skin, even for benign purposes, is unlawful and wrong, wrote the officials, who took special issue with what they termed racial preferences and quotas, because there were racial preferences and companies established quotas where they would say, we want 30% of our employees to be this color. We want 20% of our employees to be that gender. We want this percentage of our employees to have this sexual preference. Companies were doing that, and they're getting away from doing that because it is on its face, affirmative action or not, completely illegal to do that, to discriminate against people that way in the United States. The letter concluded, quote, companies that engage in racial discrimination should and will face serious legal consequences. Quote, that was a threat, said Eric Blum, Vice President of Programs and Corporate Advocacy for the Human Rights Campaign. Quote, it also demonstrates the political nature of the attack against diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, it's not political when an attorney general sends you a letter saying, stop doing illegal things, particularly when you've got a group of other attorneys general that want you to do illegal things. When they cite Supreme Court decisions or they cite statutes and they say, hey, don't do these illegal things anymore, that's not political. A leading LGBT advocacy group, HRC, publishes an annual corporate equality index that scores companies on how queer-friendly they are. Brands that have walked back their DEI pledges, including Harley-Davidson, Ford, and Lowe's, have made refusing to cooperate with the HRC a key component of that pullout. Toyota also decided to do the same thing, and there are other companies that are pulling out from HRC, but pulling into or pulling out of HRC means allowing HRC to establish how you will handle your LGBT programs and other diversity programs inside your company. You literally turn employee data over to this group, and then this group will score you and give you back a number and then tell you what you need to do to improve yourself to follow their explicit instructions. Of course, that's completely inappropriate, absurd, and it never should have happened. David Evans, Chief Insights Officer for consumer intelligence firm Collage Group, points to another factor he believes has prompted brands cool on DEI. It's an incident known as the brouhaha. In April of last year, when Bud Light partnered with trans influencer Dylan Mulvaney for a Days of Girlhood promotion, the response was volcanic. Sales fell, boycott threats flew, and the Bud Light brand caught hell from all directions. Quote, not only did you see largely white, largely conservative individuals backlashing, Evans said, but LGBT communities and their allies backlashed as well. The latter fury erupted after Bud Light seemingly turned its back on its own influencer. Quote, I was waiting for the brand to reach out to me, but they never did, Mulvaney later said in a TikTok video. And I always like to mention Dylan Mulvaney said that there was no one reaching out to me. Well, everyone in the marketing department who was involved with the promotion was thrown out of the company. So I'm not sure who would be left at the Anheuser-Busch or Bud Light marketing division to go ahead and contact Dylan Mulvaney and say, hey, how you doing there, Dylan? Are you okay? Do you want anything from us? There's not much they could really do at that point. Dylan Mulvaney also claimed to be afraid to leave his house. He said he was terrified. Yet he managed to make it to the Tony Awards and take a picture with Tony the Tiger. Literally happened. And then went on a trip to Peru or something like that and then came back. It's a little bit difficult to take Dylan Mulvaney seriously. According to Evans, many corporations were permanently frightened by the Mulvaney fiasco. And little wonder, since it cost the company $395 million in lost revenue. But it cost the Bud Light people much more than that. The Bud Light people lost the #1 spot of the biggest selling beer in America. Their sales are down at least 30% across the board nationally. In some locations, it's as bad as 80% down. At an absolute minimum, they've lost 15% of their shelf space and about 50% of their representation in bars and restaurants on taps, which is absolutely horrendous. I covered a lot of the Bud Light story. It's actually worse than anyone could have anticipated. I couldn't guess what was going to happen, except to say it looked really bad and it looked like this was a permanent change. And if the incident demonstrated the hazards of wading into the culture wars of 2023, then the election season of 2024 awakened those memories and reframed corporate DEI policies as a risk some would rather not take. Quote, a lot of beliefs, values, and policies are being discussed and debated right now, bringing that conversation into people's homes, schools, and workplaces, added Forrester principal analyst Audrey Chee-Read. DEI is just another hot-button issue that brands would prefer to avoid. Because if you're a brand, you're a promise to a consumer or a promise to a customer. That's all you are. That's all a brand is. You go into a McDonald's, you know what you're going to get. You buy any product or use any service from a well-known brand, you know what you're going to get. That's the value of the brand. Trying to make it political is completely ridiculous and, of course, destroys the value of the brand. DEI certainly didn't feel like a hot-button issue 4 years ago. After the death of George Floyd, corporate America scrambled to create and fund DEI programs to the tune of $7.5 billion, according to the consultant McKinsey & Company. But as Wharton marketing professor Kate Lamberton observed, that sense of urgency has faded, and even companies that made significant progress on the diversity front may feel like it's time to shift gears. For example, Molson Coors imprint reform from last year touted that the company had achieved just over 29% representation of people of color in its U.S. workforce and had given diverse suppliers more than $640 million in business. Diverse suppliers are suppliers who sell things to the company. In this case, it could be hops for the beer, but it could be anything that's supplied to the company, and those diverse suppliers are not a lot of just different suppliers. They have certain races, they have certain skin colors, they have certain sexual preferences. The suppliers that sell the hops of the beer or whatever product they're selling to that company. That's what they're bragging about. It's not necessarily the best deal. The best deal has nothing to do with it. They have the best skin color as far as Molson Coors was concerned. Companies that set up ambitious DEI goals such as these Lambert suggested were doing it because corporate America had fallen short for so long. It was a rebirth story. But last year, companies were publishing reports saying that they had reached their goals. A rebirth narrative doesn't continue forever. Some 1,400 companies shared information with the HRC for its 2025 Corporate Equality Index, the highest ever so far. A Morning Consult survey consulted earlier this year found that 82% of C-suite executives, C-suite is like CFO, CEO, Chief Operating Officer, supposedly still regard diversity initiatives as essential to their business strategy. Those few companies backing away from DEI, Blum said, from the HRC, are making short-sighted business decisions. Those decisions by a few may ultimately stain consumers' perceptions of brands in general, according to Joellen Posner, who teaches management at Santa Clara University's Levy School of Business. She said the companies so quick to abandon DEI are playing into the hands of cynics. But the fact that they are now publicly saying we don't need DEI is tantamount to an admission that companies didn't really mean it, that they don't have values, Posner said. It makes us feel like nobody's serious about anything. It's impossible to take the diversity people seriously. None of what they say makes any sense. The whole purpose of having a corporation is like having an interlocking working system of resources: people, machines, computers, information, and then customers that also feed into that machine with requests for products and services. Everything has to work based on merit. You can't say, yeah, but merit's not fair, so let's pretend it doesn't exist. You have to say it exists. If you're going to bake a cake and you have a bunch of ingredients, all of those ingredients have to be fresh and they have to be the correct ingredients. That's it. You've got to have quality ingredients if you're going to make a quality cake. And it doesn't just work for cake. Every business, every system is like a chain. Every link has to work. If you have a weak link, either because you don't have an employee where you need them, or you don't have a process where you need it, or that link in the chain is half broken, it affects the production of the entire system in many, many cases. Not in every case. Some people do unimportant work. Some people don't even need to be at the company, like, for example, the entire diversity department. But for every weak link you put in that chain, you risk more and more having an unproductive, destructive system and eventually putting the company out of business. Of course, some of the brands backtracking on DEI have taken semantic pains to indicate that they're still serious. Tractor Supply may be eliminating its DEI goals, but said it will do so while ensuring a respectful environment. At Ford, hiring quotas are out, but the company remains deeply committed to fostering a safe and inclusive workspace, according to the letter that CEO Jim Farley sent to his employees. But these newer, vaguer promises do not move diversity advocates, like the president and CEO of civil rights organization, the National Urban League, who believes that brands retreating from DEI have caved into pressures that they should have resisted. At some point, when companies are busy doing things that are clearly illegal just because they push a social agenda, and the more they do of it, the more normal it does seem, even if it's illegal, and you can't put every CEO in jail and you can't sue every company. However, if it's wrong, you can't be doing it. It's poisonous to the culture. Everyone has to have an opportunity to achieve things based on merit, such as getting on the board of directors. From Fast Company, corporate DEI may be under attack, but S&P 500 companies, that's Standard & Poor's, major companies, with diverse boards of directors perform better. Now, if you force someone onto a board because it's a successful company and you want to do that as a trophy, and then you go and say, look, we've got this successful company. Look how diverse the board is. It's because the board is diverse. No, it's not true. Of course, the company that's successful is successful because it's a good company, not because of the skin color or gender or sexual preferences of the people on the board of directors. The company is successful based on merit in the marketplace, not based on the skin color or the gender or sexual preferences of people that sit on the board of directors. Cosmetics brand ELF Beauty has partnered with North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University to release a new report that draws on board membership data over the past 5 years, as well as findings from previous studies. Okay, so here's what these geniuses have determined. Diverse boards perform better. Companies with higher board gender diversity had 15% higher return on equity. Equity is the money invested in the company to operate, so 15% more, and a 50% reduction in earnings risk compared to less diverse peers. A 2021 study found that corporate social responsibility and financial performance are correlated, and the magnitude of the relationship depends on how diverse a board is. So the more, make it as diverse as possible. Why even allow anyone that doesn't fit into the DEI agenda to sit on a board of directors? It should be illegal, right? Meanwhile, companies with 3 or more women or minority directors had a lower likelihood of lawsuits. So if you want to protect yourself from lawsuits, and we all do, who needs to get sued? It's not pleasant. Just put all women on your board of directors. If you can, try to make them gay or at least queer. Diversity is still hard to achieve. A typical board is 78% white, 73% male, and 58% white male. In general, boards tend to hire people who are similar to their members and achieve racial or gender diversity, but not both. In an analysis of the 100 most gender diverse boards, women made up 59% of total members, and white members had 73% of the seats. These kinds of percentages and numbers are so ridiculously dehumanizing. What you, of course, want on a board of directors, and I was on the board of directors of a small public company. On a board, you want people that are competent to help out everyone else with whatever the mission of the company is. And having industry-specific experience is also helpful. If you're going to have a restaurant chain, for example, you would want to have people that know the restaurant industry, know marketing, know finance. There are a variety of skill sets that would apply to a situation like that, but that's what you have to do, because those are people that are supposed to be evaluating the top executives at the company and the strategy and the finances and what they're doing with millions and sometimes billions of dollars worth of equity, of investment that the public is trusting with the board of directors to help oversee. You really need qualified people. It's like the idea of having an airline pilot who actually knows how to fly a plane. Changing the skin color of the airline pilot is not going to give you better results. Thank goodness progress is happening, but it's unequal. White women make up 72% of the board seats held by women. Black Americans make up 14.4% of the US population, but they only hold 7.3% of board seats. So why not just grab people off the street of a certain skin color or a certain gender? Perhaps they could be illegal aliens, and then just throw them onto the board of directors and see what happens. And just while you're at it, why not just let anyone be the CEO of a company based on their skin color? For example, from Forbes, with so many CEO exits, so many CEOs leaving their jobs, it's time to tap a diversity officer to lead. To lead what? To lead the actual company, yes. Take someone from a chief diversity officer position, which of course is a complete nonsense position, and make them responsible for the careers and the lives and the families of all the employees of that company and any of the other businesses or companies that depend on this company to do its function so that society can continue. But anyway, just throw a diversity officer in there, make him CEO. The author says, having worked in the C-suite for the past decade, I've seen many CFOs, COOs, and CMOs become CEOs. CFO Chief Financial Officer, COO Chief Operating Officer, CMO Chief Marketing Officer, becoming the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer. But I've never seen a Chief Diversity Officer step into that role. You've also never seen a cartoon character literally step off a TV screen and run into the world and then run around like it's Roger Rabbit, because it's absurd. He continues, in fact, of all the diversity leads at Fortune 5000 companies, I have not found one example of a CDO ever being named CEO, either as a replacement or as an advancement into a vacancy. Because to get to be in a position of CEO, you have to actually accomplish a few things. You've got to demonstrate a background and a history that shows that you can be trusted with that responsibility and that it looks like you're going to function in that job. Being passionate about a human resources function where you're trying to push diversity on a company does not qualify you to be a chief executive. And we also have from Forbes, diversity by class background can improve team performance. Now, understand this. This article is written by a sociologist, so she has no background in business. She comments on business. She's a sociology professor. And here's her theory. People who grow up in different classes, with parents with distinct incomes, educations, and occupations, often learn to see the world differently. These differences tend to stay with them even if they change classes as adults. Many of these differences are complementary. Where one group struggles, the other shines. Those from more disadvantaged class backgrounds rarely grow up in families with the money or authority to prevent problems from forming. As if only people without money have problems. If we've learned one thing growing up and living on this planet, we've learned that everyone has their own set of problems. It's how you respond to them that makes the difference. She continues, they then face more problems and often become skilled at spontaneous problem solving. Those from more advantaged class backgrounds grow up with parents whose money and authority enable them to stave off many problems. They usually grow up with more stability and predictability. Yes, you do have stability in a household when stability is a priority for the parents of that household. And those individuals do tend to do better in society because they've got a foundation throughout their entire lives. That's one of the benefits of having a stable family life. And that's why people put so much effort into their families. It's not like a side project. It's important. It helps the individuals. It helps everyone in the family. Regardless of whatever silly explanations they try to come up with, it's very clear that merit is the only thing that matters when you're trying to get a job done. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.